I'm tempted to use the game, but I will not. I'd like to appear before you the way I first appeared in my class. But then again, when I was deciding on what to wear this morning, it just struck me that I would like to dedicate this to two men who were responsible for getting me into AIM's faculty, and to the one who convinced my father to force me to enroll in AIM. He was a very simple man. He was a very straightforward man. He dressed like this, sandals without socks. The other one wore socks, but sandals too. Their names are Gaston C. Ortigas and Gabino Mendoza, the guiding lights of AIM when I started out as a student 14, God's how many years ago, 1968. We were the first graduating class, as you know. From there, I led a life that took me to advertising, which I did not like because I knew I would become a very good liar. Oh, I make lots of money, but I also lie a lot. I mean, when you say 100% pure coffee, but you're an instant coffee, how could you be 100% pure coffee? I think you know what I mean. And my boss was the president, and at that time, the dean of advertising in the Philippines, Antonio De Hoya, told me, you saw the problem, you solved it. I had to backtrack. The consideration was the account is paid. And I realized, no, this is not the life I wanted to live. My wife and I was here, Cora. She's been my traveling companion since 1967. When in a moment of perfect madness, she said yes to me. After I, in a moment of perfect lucidity, decided she was the one I wanted as my wife. We started that journey, and we're still continuing. Service has always been in our hearts. Well, as you big guys, we think we're the saviors of the world. Or only some of us. Some of us think the world owes us. And there are names I could mention, but maybe I'd rather not. I want this to be a pleasant morning. My life has taken me to teaching, to consultancy in many parts of the world, including Africa, where I stayed for 4 months. Yes, I am a soldier, not by choice, but by conscription. In 1984-85, I was approached by then Colonel Rene Medina, who is MEM 72, to help the Special Action Force consolidate itself. And so I did wear the uniform, much to my wife's consternation. I just did not tell her that I'd started to jump out of airplanes again. And that I actually was part of mop-up operations for 2 anti-NPA battles in the Camarines Norte and in Negros Occidental. Don't tell me whether I killed people, I just shot back. I didn't bother to ask whether I killed anybody. But the biggest learning I had was in working with people, not in doing something grand. I think a real manager, a real leader has to work with people and not to be the subject of my lecture. I decided I would use a PowerPoint so that I could do it fast, and then I would open up for questions, because I think that's the soul of the AIM case. I came in as a pure case method professor. I seldom lectured. My first line in class was, "We'd like to start the case." I don't know how often you hear that now. I hope they bring it back. That was part of the soul that we lost, or at least lost partly along the way. I call my talk today "Leading Change Lessons from a Life." Okay? I hope I get this right. Why change? Well, because our world is changing constantly and often turbulently. We get left behind unless we change in sync with or ahead of the world. But that is not a skill that comes easily. It's something that you must learn how to discern whether change will last versus whether the change is just a fad. Uh, I consider, for example, the fascination with President Duterte a fad. I think people got taken. I want him to succeed. I did not vote for him, but I want him to succeed because it will be good for us. I only wish he would stop joking the way he does. And I wish he would consult with people before he says things. Because when a powerful man speaks, people tend to take a joke serious. I don't know if you had Beckett in your college English, the play Beckett, where King Henry II says, "Will no one rid me of these meddlesome priests?" And 4 of his barons think he gave them an order to kill the bishop. And they did. When all the while he was just, kumbaga sa Tagalog, nagbubuntong hininga. He was just heaving a sigh of frustration because his best friend would not allow him to do what he wanted to do, being now a bishop rather than a minister of state. What are the triggers for change? Changes, developments in the larger environment is one. Changes within the organization is another. But changes within or about each of us is also another. We do change, and with that change, we change our perception of the world. And when we change our perception of the world, we change the way we relate to the world. Triggers may be in anticipation of an impending shift, which means you have to see the shift, or as a reaction to an event that has occurred. And normally you will find that if you change ahead of the actual shift, there's less of a problem. There's more of a problem when you change the reaction because it's normally more costly. And that means somebody may have been ahead of you. This was done by a secretary who thought I wanted this kind of a presentation. No, I just wanted all in one blow. You have to be very clear what is the less desired situation versus the more desired situation. You have to be clear to yourself why you do not like this old situation as much and why you prefer the other situation. And you have to describe these two contending situations specifically because it is only when it's clear to you that you can make it clear to others. Okay? This is the old Mackenzie framework, the 1982. But it's been very useful. Normally in organizations, you will have to look at this 7 S's plus the goals. Because it could be possible that the goals are no longer tenable. I guess in our case, in AIM's case, this one was the one that we did not pay too close attention to. The world had changed, but we had not changed as much. And therefore, our strategy proved less than adequate. Our skills proved less than adequate, at least for a time. The staff we needed was not there. And I think the other thing was, as a result of the reaction, we took in too many people who were not inured to the old AIM. And as a result, the shared values kind of dissipated. In the old AIM, before we were shut into class, we had to observe the masters. We had to observe these method guys, how they did it. And then they threw us into the classroom and we made our first mistakes. I more than most. I had the worst ratings of the faculty in the first year of my teaching, to the point where they only gave me a 1-year contract the next year for observation. But I recovered and I learned. And I'm thankful to the students because every year I learn something new. I am in a nice situation. They pay me to learn. And you're my teachers, whether you know it or not. A word of warning. Change can be dangerous. When an institution loses its soul, it loses its direction. I opted not to give AIM. I opted to give the first major job I occupied. On record, I am supposed to be the youngest person to have been appointed associate director of a major government commission. I was 24 years old. Not because I was brilliant. They just needed an AIM graduate there for sexiness. And I happened to look sexy in the suit. I spoke English without an accent. And my color combinations were okay. And I was mayabang. I was very cocky. So they needed me. But when PopCom started, it was just purveying contraceptives. 3 years later, we found our soul. We were there to help people. We were there to help people. We were not there to sell contraceptives. And if you want to help people, you have to know where they are, why they do what they do. And that's not easy. Now, PopCom found that soul, but several years later, because of the turmoil in the country, cut a long story short, they fired the old executive director because he was being difficult, and the U.S. government, USAID, did not find him comfortable to work with, so they eased him out, and with him went the soul, and with him went the effectivity of PopCom. The program he started was called the Total Integrated Development Approach, which meant people were at the center. The old program had contraceptives at the center. when you shift from helping people to selling goods, what are you really doing? You stop being developmental. And I hope you guys never forget that. Most common drivers for change, as we said, government and NGO, since you're mostly from government and NGO. I'm very happy that some of my friends who are non-AIM as well as AIM are here. You have graduates from the MDM who are here, graduates from the MDM who are here. People who never went to AIM, Jimmy Kura over there is an old friend from UP, used to be with the government, and we still talk a lot about tourism. Because he was very much in that right here, and I'm gratified. I was afraid we would have an overflow crowd until they announced that it would be live streamed, because then that meant the good side of that was you will have more chance to ask me questions. Changes in community character is critical. You have to change. You have to spot that, and it's not easy to spot. The major changes that we did not spot immediately produced Donald Trump, produced Digong Duterte, produced Mocha Usod. I mean, she's not bad. I mean, if you look at her background, she's a medical technologist. But I guess the human body did not interest her as much as her own body. And displaying it to the rest of the world. I just find her boobs a little too big for my face. Besides, it's very skinned. I like my women thin and dark. She was that before she got my wife, I mean, you know. You need to have changes in audience impact. I mean, is your program still relevant? If it is not, then look at why it's no longer relevant. Feedback from frontliners is critical. Sometimes we ignore those who are there in the front. We think we know better at head office. There is this arrogance that people at head office knows better. Especially a special class of people who have only their degrees and their peer-reviewed papers to boast about. But nothing much about life. PhD can stand for pahabaan ng dissertation. The longer the dissertation, the more accomplished they feel they are. But there's only one question I ask. So how has your dissertation made life better for people? If you can show that, and there are people I can give you who can show that, former Professor Nelly Roberto of AIM, former Professor Ed Monato of AIM, former Dean Gaston Roquitas of AIM. They produced peer-reviewed journals, but they translated it to actionable points, which to me is critical in making sure that you not only stretch the envelope of knowledge, but you also contribute to the welfare of people. Sometimes you forget the second one when you're a PhD. Changes in leadership, management, structure, and mergers one of the biggest changes to me that was critical in AIM was when we changed the old board of trustees more to alumni who were really business-oriented rather than maybe service-oriented. Because deep in the soul of AIM in the past was service to the people. We're not bleeding hearts, NGOs. We realized that we need to make money. But we also said, let's not beggar the market. Let's not beggar our audience. And we were willing to give service for free because we knew the goodwill would generate social investment. And that was the time when AIM would call a forum. You would see people like Don Jaime Sobel, Don Enrique Sobel, the Sorianos, the Elizaldes, the big wigs. They would come. And they would tell us what we needed to know. Now I don't see that too frequently. And I'm sad. Then there's direct and indirect competition. This is where we really got blindsided. We never figured out on people from the US and Europe bringing their operations to Asia. And when you are in the business community, you'd like to go to those schools simply because of their access to the universities there and their access to the big communities. How do you fight an INSEAD which can list 100 plus big European and American corporations listed as their partners in developing teaching material and in doing research? The problem we have in the Philippines, and we've failed to recognize this, is really that our economy is not robust enough for people to pay attention to us. Our advanced bank management program, which used to be the program at the time when people from Indonesia and Malaysia, even Singapore, were sending people to observe our banking practices, lost its market because at one point they said there's nothing more we can learn from the Philippines. You've been set back. But I guess we've been too arrogant to believe that. And that's where we sometimes fail. Not sometimes, that's where we often fail. We are a country that's ruled by people who, as long as they're comfortable, don't really care much about what's happening to the rest of the country. Ours is a very feudal country. Then there's the development in technology, work processes, human resource composition, and lifestyles that I think you watch out in your EA, your environmental analysis. That was the purpose for your, have they gone to their RAA? That was the purpose for your RAA. So that you get at least an immersion. Then most common sources of resistance to change, well, ignorance is number one. Fear of risks, the unknown, fear of failure. I am so surprised to learn that people are very afraid to fail because they do not wish to be embarrassed. I've heard people say in Tagalog, baka magmukha akong gago. And then my response is, alam naman na may tao pa, bakit ako mahihiya? Or as the Indonesian would say, hindi mo, yung mukha ko rusa. My face will be destroyed. It's not just Philippines and Indonesia, it's all over the world. You'd be surprised as to how many American companies and how many European companies, the people we consider the lead, have actually very human considerations. Then, of course, inertia, laziness, complacency, tradition and culture. We don't realize how tradition and culture can hold us back. I'm not saying that we should throw everything out. But there are certain things you don't throw out, like a seal of a school, and replace it with something that you don't understand. Somebody said an amoeba. I don't mind it being a slogan. I don't mind it being the seal for a slogan of a campaign. But you don't take away the seal of the school, which are its fruits. which are schools. I'm sorry, I wish my president were here so that I would not be accused of talking at her back. I just realized that talking behind her back means talking in front of her. And when you say he made a 360-degree turn, you return him to the original position. We have to watch out for these kinds of words. In one class, in my first class, there was a guy who said, I believe that this is a dog-eat-dog world, and I'm going to be the biggest dog in this valley. I said, well, at least I know what your mother is. I was shocked, and then somebody said, oops. Then there's existing structures and systems. Oh, bureaucracies are known for this. They don't want to change structures and systems because they're used to it already. And this is not just here, this is all over. Sometimes you have to be radical in order to change. And I'm glad God gifted me with a careless soul. I open my mouth when I feel like it, because I can always say I'm sorry. If they forgive me, fine. If they don't forgive me, at least I said what needed to be said. If I hurt them, I say I'm sorry too. Jimmy and I are on opposite scales. In UP, he was one of those who was respectable. I was one of those who was radical. I never got arrested simply because I knew how to keep out of harm's way. And besides, they were wondering, what is a grandnephew of the vice president doing in the ranks of the radicals? I had a very good alibi. I was covering it for the collegiate and DCUP. Then, of course, there are lack of needed skills in security. Sometimes we think that when you taught people, okay na, until you realize that it takes confidence to use a new skill because you're not yet perfect at it. And this is when you have to be close to the people who learn a new skill so that you can handhold them for a while until they really join, until they really feel the confidence. Then there is prejudices and biases. It's not ours. So why should we pay attention? We're great. Biases. Oh, that comes from Africa. Why should I pay attention? It used to be that came from Indonesia. Why should we pay attention? Look at where Indonesia is now. As the Indonesians would say, Pak Mayo, yung orang Pilipina, hintas ka, very intelligent, but sometimes too intelligent. They want everything original. But look at us Indonesians. We don't mind copying because, we are kurang pengertian, kurang we lack knowledge, we lack understanding, so we don't mind copying. Well, I've got news for you. The most popular car in the Philippines now is the Innova, right? Guess where the original Innova came from? It came from the Toyota Tamarao. I know some of you are too young to remember. It came from the Tamarao. Look how far they've taken it in cooperation with Thailand. Look how far we are behind. The Alphard, which was introduced when? Last year? That was in Indonesia 10 years ago. The Avanza was developed by the Indonesians also because they found out that there was a market for a smaller version of the Innova. A very humble people, yet they are advancing. We're so proud. Look what got us. Some of the proudest sons of bitches in this country are called honorable. They occupy Congress, and they occupy the judiciary, and they occupy the executive. Like that joker with the wig. His name is Akire. Then you have vested interest. This is what gets us. My biggest disappointment with Cory Aquino was when she refused to ban reform Hacienda Luisita. That is where I saw that we would not move because vested interests still rule. That is what my biggest disappointment to each president that we've had, because I saw how vested in my associations have put me in circles where I could see what was happening. Why did I not support Digong? Because of the people who were behind me. Not all, but the big ones. Marcos, the Bongo, the one who wants redemption without remorse, the one who wants salvation without sacrifice. When they made the false news that Imelda died, I said, sumalangit nawa. And I was not sure, I was unhappy. Then they said to straight. That's when I felt sad. I'm going to get this. I'm really going to get into trouble with what I'm saying.
It's on record.
Oops. To achieve changes that involve many untried steps into new strange territory, very high levels of trust are necessary, and emotions run high. Now, when you step into a situation where people do not know really what to expect, and emotions are the ones that are ruling, then to me, effective leadership is the key, more than efficient management. The difference between management and leadership, which itself is a big topic, emerged only in the 1970s and became very explicit in the 90s. But as I said, it's something that maybe Professor Nieves can discuss with you in future classes, or maybe even Ken. Or if he sees his way to, this may not be my last lecture in class, I would gladly take you to my own journey on leadership. No? But we will not discuss that because that's another 3 hours. AIM does have this model, but we never propagated it because it was too complex for the peer-reviewed journals to understand. But this is the reality of leadership. For you to be an effective leader, you must have a clear purpose that you believe in and that you must convince people. Now, I put an asterisk here because people are not a monolith. People are composed of so many segments. And that is what makes the situation complex and very complicated. And you must agree with them what the operating principles are that you will work with in achieving the goals and what the operating processes are. Unless they agree with these two, you will have difficulty pushing your agenda. Now, but you need at least 3 major traits. First is your passion for doing the job. Nothing was ever done well that was done without passion. But you also have to be careful about passion. Passion can lead you to the wrong things. It makes you hear only what you want to hear, see only what you want to see. Then there's perseverance. Do not underrate patience. As T.S. White said, or is it E.B. White now? I forget, the man who wrote Once and Future King. He said the essence of faith is patience. You have to have patience in order to see things through. In fact, there was one even more earlier, perspicacity. If you don't know that word, I will attribute that to a deterioration in Philippine education. This was one of the first words we learned when we were in grade school. It simply means the ability to perceive what is not obvious. Perspicacity, perspective. Okay? Now, same root word. Oops. I think they changed the battery of this and half of this. This is a model from a 1940s social scientist, Kurt Lewin. He's a social psychologist who said, if you want people to change, you have to unfreeze them first. And then when they melt, that's the time you refreeze them into what you want them to become. This is not a slow process. This is not a painless process. Anybody who has done physics will realize how much energy is required to melt ice and how much energy it is required to refreeze water into ice. The more you know about the sciences, the more you're able to draw appropriate, appropriate analogies. No? Now, I've used this since I first started talking about strategic planning in the 80s. You will notice it seems to be one person. It could be one person, it could be one organization. But notice that there are at least 3 strands of thought leading to his mind before he condenses them, puts them together into one trend of thought that reveals a vision that everybody can believe in. No? Now the big question is, how do you travel from here to there? I think this is what business management is all about. This is what development management is all about. This is what leadership is all about. This is another physics thing, that for an airplane to fly, you have to have contending forces. You have to have the blue forces, lift, push, and thrust, overcome drag, pull, and resistance. You can use this as an analogy. What are push, thrust, and lift in organizations? What are drag, pull, and resistance in organization? Again, this is another lecture. I will not go into it. And your job is, how do I increase the plus forces? How do I decrease the negative forces? Change efforts can be started. Challenges, when handled poorly, results in failure. I like this image because you have an outdated and sinking boat being run by a fat bureaucracy with a beautiful plan that really is not rooted in reality and therefore cannot work. And therefore he is forced to say, saklolo. Yeah. Many organizations I have worked with have been in this position. And I have worked with, believe it or not, from fourth-class municipalities who begged me to do work with them and then apologized that they could only give me enough for my gasoline. I said, the pleasure and the honor and the privilege of working with you is more than enough. Of course, when you do work for these people, your driver comes up to you and says, Sir, let's not buy anything anymore. Why? There's no more place to put in the car. We went to Nagcarlan and we went home with 5 kaings of lanzones, 2 gallons of adobong bayawak, and 2 big baskets of assorted vegetables and 2 big baskets of fruits, and I didn't know where to put them. That's how they say thank you. And then the friendship is there. The reaching out is there. That to me is the greatest privilege that you can have as development managers, when people extend themselves to you. We need to mobilize relationships and resources, and this involves risks. And this is what you're being trained to do. Take that risk. Take that risk. You may fail, but people are often forgiving if they know your mistake was honest. At tapi, yung orang Indonesia will tell you, awas daw, awas, be careful daw. But the Indonesians, they may move slowly, but when they move, they really move decisively. I keep on mentioning Indonesia because it was my second home for so many years. As my children would tell me, I spent more time there than anywhere else in the world. And I fell in love with it. I'd like you to remember this, Murphy's Law. Oh, incidentally, you can ask Lyndon for copies of this. I'm leaving it with him. This is now better than the original copy that I had, because I made some last-minute changes. No? Nothing is as simple as it looks. Things will always take longer than they should because we find out that we did not take everything into account. And if anything can go wrong, it will at the worst possible time. This is the one that is most remembered of Murphy's Law. But you must remember there are 2 other components, and none more than development management. These complexities that are not always obvious we need to move, these complexities are not always obvious. We need to move slowly in sensing the lay of the land, deliberately assessing the interactions of the forces, and how they may move when we introduce change elements. Once we have done this, we sense the right timing and move decisively. Timing and moving decisively are key to effective change. Lesson number 1 that I learned. In life, we are confronted with many lists of do's and don'ts, painted as black or white situations. Then we spend our lives selecting actions that cover more than 50 shades of gray. Yes, there are more than 50 shades of gray, not only in sex, but more so in life. I think my wife and I covered more than 50 shades. And 2 of the results of that are my 2 youngest sons. One is an EMBA graduate, the other is doing his EMBA. We start from the bottom. The youngest is the graduate. The second from the youngest is now taking it up. The older 2 do not want to take the MBA. They said if we ever enroll in the area, we want the MDM. The oldest is a LaSalle brother, and so do not expect any grandchild from him. I asked him, celibacy, yes. Chastity, he says, I think he masturbates. It's got to. It's painful to keep it there, you know. I don't know how many of your professors are honest enough. Not this guy. If he had not been a soldier and a doctor, he would be in the seminary. Probably be a bishop by now. Now, this is what I see as happening in many countries around the world. We have countries who declare themselves as democracy. And if you read democracies, and if you read their official document, they are all in this quadrant. Loyalty to principles and ethical behavior that are universal in scope. Transparent systems of formal rules and regulations applied equally to all. And then we wind up realizing that our daily lives and our daily behavior are dictated by traditions that we were inured as children. I don't know if you realize that. When people ask me, where do children need to lie? My wife immediately said, oh, in the house. That's where they learn to lie. How? When they hear you say to your housemaid, when somebody comes calling that you don't want to see, sabihin mo, wala ako dito. Tell them I am not here. That's a lie. And whether you like it or not, that already tells the kids it's okay to lie. Just be sure you're not discovered. Or you can say, I was joking. Or have your executive spokesman say that he was just joking, he just misunderstood the president. We are so black and white, we forget life is the full spectrum of the rainbow. And I like this picture because you notice that the light and dark, the white and the black, do come out. I love this photograph. Right now, AIM is here. But I think Jikyong, with the help of the faculty and the staff and the alumni, will move into this place. She's here. Now you cannot accuse me of talking behind her. No, I like Jikyong because she can be hard-headed. There's no doubt about that. She can be very dictatorial when she wants to be, but she tries to be pleasant about it. And I've always respected her for that. And maybe I love her because of that. Though sometimes I want to get thrown the head. Now, lesson number 2. People are complex and complicated. Sorry. It's never good to edit your own work. You see what you want to see. People are complex and complicated. People don't always know what they need or want. Therefore, they cannot tell you. They may not tell you what they really need or want out of embarrassment. And people lie. Miriam Santiago, for example, I eschewed politics after my then she said, why did you return to politics? I lied. No. I don't know, I lost my faith in Miriam even before she said that. We saw her in UP when we were both students, and we had the greatest admiration for her. She's one of those guys that UP graduates cum laude. But they seem to have forgotten that UP's symbol is the oblation, giving yourself to your country and to God. And that the motto of UP is honor and excellence, with honor coming before excellence. Why? Because you have to discern the right thing before you do it well. Many of our graduates have learned to cheat excellently. Many of them are graduates of the College of Law. That's why when Ed Angara says he wanted to do away with the School of Education, I said, Ed, for the same, he said that you have PNU. For the same reason, you have lots of law colleges. Why don't you close the School of Law? And he says, half the Congress will go against it. I said, is that why our Congress is so bad? And he himself was brought up in the College of Law. Now, number 3, we don't always learn the right lessons from our experience. As a 24-year-old, I was asked to talk to 35 and above big bosses in the POPCO to convince them that we needed to have a computer-based projection system for our contraceptive needs. And it took me the good part of 8 months to convince them that we needed it. Finally, they gave in. And they were, these were mostly women, older women, very much like battle axes. Matatatang, matataray. Really, they could put you down if they wanted to. Besides, they were medical doctors. And I was a lowly MBA. Until I pointed out to them, ma'am, you're planning figure pills. What is it? Mayo, it's a no-brainer. It's 12 cycles a year. Oh. Then why are there only 28 pills in a cycle? And if you divide 365 by 28, the figure is not 12, it's 13.08. From that time on, they listened a little bit more. Anyway, after so many months of haggling, 12 months, they agreed. And so when it succeeded, they were, and in my boyish arrogance, I said, can you ladies tell me what finally convinced you that I was right? And they started to laugh. And said, Mayo, it was not the logic. You look like a little boy who was about to cry if you didn't get what you wanted. And we brought out the mother instinct in us. And they said, we told ourselves, let him. If he fails, he will learn. If he succeeds, we'll praise him. I never forgot that. I always put on this little boy look. Comes naturally with a started guy like me. Now, always ensure that top management leaders are open to and support changes that you propose. It's critical. If your top bosses are against your change, they may not say anything, but it will not move very fast. In line with that, it also helps if you can get external parties whom they believe in to believe in what you're saying, because then the influence is very strong. Okay? Incidentally, this blue and green, the original colors of AIM, were derived from a lecture I was asked to give by the Canadian International Development Agency in a regional meeting in a meeting of the regional staffs for Asia Pacific in 1995. I was very scared, and yet it was very well received. They all asked for copies of it. And they said that I write an article. I said I'm too lazy. When Ken asked me, when Ken introduced me as a scholar, no, I'm not a scholar. At best, I am an intellectual. I don't really remember things that scholars do. Maui might be an even better scholar. At least I think she is. I could be wrong. Ken is definitely a better scholar than I am. Chikyong is definitely a better scholar than I am. You know, my only question is, guess who gets listened to more often? Not everyone who is silent or agrees with you openly wants you to succeed. Some of them are giving you enough rope to hang yourself. I think you've had experiences with those. It also follows that not everyone who opposes you wants you to fail. Sometimes they're just trying to find out whether you have thought enough about what you're proposing so that you've anticipated the worst possible outcomes. Be very explicit about the vision you're trying to attain and the goals that lead to the attainment. Show why these are good for all concerned, whether immediately, medium term, or long term. You need to assure people that in the short of it and the long of it, they will benefit. Work out the specific objectives for the medium and short terms and step-by-step plan with milestones for achieving this. They serve as consolations for people who are a little edgy. Number 11, most people can and do change their minds in light of new information and or experience. Share new information and experience. Better yet, make them experience it. One of the things I did when I was associate director in POPCO was our Americans were so in love with their technology. They wanted to do summer in July. For those Filipinos who know summer in July, you know what that means. That's rainy season. Summer in the 70s was mud roads. And you were telling them you'd be lucky to do one clinic a day. Oh, no, we've got four-wheelers. Okay, fine, we'll do. First clinic we went to, we were being told to turn back because the road had become very muddy. The Americans said, oh, we'll just put on the four-wheel drive. Sure, go ahead, right? Both person will follow. Jeep goes like that, gets stuck. The more it worked, the lower it sank until in panic the American jumped out. We came back for it the next day. The mud had hardened. So we had to spend the whole day digging out the bloody Jeep. And from that time on, they started to pay attention to us. These brown-skinned monkeys know what they're talking about. I said, just because you've got a white skin doesn't mean you know everything. I felt like telling that to some AACSB graders. Chunk the change. Sometimes it's too large. So chunk it into portions that people can see, that people can see themselves succeeding in. Each victory builds up confidence. Each defeat brings down confidence. The more victories you have, the more people will join. I think I say that in the other. Make clear the rewards of the change to everyone who will be benefited. And that's why you have to sit down and really find out what do people really want. And you have to connect with those wants. I'm looking at my watch so that I can still give you at least several minutes of question and answer. There are only 21 or 22, so acknowledge the price users have to pay. This is critical. Do not be overly enthusiastic. Acknowledge that there will be a price to pay, and some people will pay a higher price than others. When we shifted to ACSB accreditation, we of the old guard felt that our skill as case method professors all of a sudden lost its currency. And we could see why. And we saw the need to bring in lectures because the efficiency of teaching people new tools was critical. We accepted that. What I could not see was the acceptance of some of the new guard that the case method was in fact a key to the success of the managers that we train. At least for the first 10 or maybe even 1990, 20 years. You graduated in 1990. Yeah. Up to 1990, the classes who were who were case method in orientation were top of the line for many people, for many organizations that hired. In fact, I was telling my children, don't be like me that was forced into AIM immediately out of college. Your mother rose from the ranks, and when she took her 1 year MM, her absorptive capacity was so much greater simply because she had kumbaga sa agriculture, if you were to put it na, the land was prepared well. Okay? Be the prime example of the behavior the organization has to change. The power of example is very critical. Be always mindful of what people you're trying to change value most. Never tread rudely on these values. Oh, I made those mistakes early in my life. To me, if you're stupid, you're stupid. I didn't realize that there are several shades of stupid. And they can be stupid for not necessarily bad reasons. They may only appear stupid to you because you don't understand their point of view. And that ultimately you are the guy who's stupid because you didn't understand them. That's critical, especially for development managers. Never underestimate the knowledge of the people, the folklore that you step into when you go into a change situation. Number 19, get the gatekeepers, the opinion leaders on your side. If you cannot get active approval, secure at least silent and inactive skepticism, if there is any. It is critical to neutralize contradicting voices at the initial. There is truth to the adage that it is the singer, not the song, that people often pay attention to. No matter how good a message, if you don't look credible, people will not pay attention to you. I'm reminded of this example of one of my best friends, the late Dr. Antonio Socrates, who gave up a very lucrative career in Britain as a surgeon to come back to Palawan, his home province, to bring development. He came to me one day in the office complaining that the guard in the Spanish embassy would not let him in. And I asked him, did you go like this? He says, yes. I said, I can see why they wouldn't let you in. He was there, and he was disheveled, his hair was all over the place, he was sweating, his t-shirt was faded in several places, his pants were frayed, he was wearing sandals without socks. I said, okay, let's go across to the other side. At that time, we still had Fairmart over there. I bought him a barong. I said, change your pants as well if you have something in your bag. And wear socks with your sandals. The next day he went, and then he comes to me and says, those idiots, as soon as I came in, they let me in. I said, it's the presentation that's critical. They didn't know your message because they could only see the packaging. So they were looking at the singer, not the song. It's critical. Don't issue a little sartorial elegance, or at least a little sartorial neatness. I keep on telling my youngest son that. He's very much unlike his third brother, whom I don't have to say anything. Number 21, some radical supporters turn off or turn away moderates. You see this in the Duterte camp. It doesn't take very much to get turned off by Mocha Uson, or even Aguirre. I wish he'd stop wearing that way. Most important, honor the past. The institutions you're in, the organizations you're in, did not survive because they were bad. They survived because they were doing something good. But you need to change. So, change but honor the past. Don't throw it out the window. I know Chikyo is not going to like this, but one of the first acts that I and several professors did after they changed the logo was we sent word to this SA that we wanted to buy as many t-shirts that had the old logo because many of our fellow alumni wanted it. Why? Because it stood for something. It stood for something. I was of the generation that regardless of where I went in Asia, if I said I had an MBA, oh, here I am. It was immediately recognized, and there was no question about whether we should be there or not. This is easier said than done, especially if you're very impatient. The biggest enemy of the development manager, the biggest enemy of any manager, business or not, or any leader, business or not, is impatience. Makes you do all kinds of crazy things. Be clear to yourself why you are working for the change. Unless you're clear, it will be very difficult to convey the message. This is, again, something that I'm very sure your professors will have exposed you to, so I will not cover this. If you do not, then they will expose this to you later in the year when it comes to managing change. I'm just telling you what's in store for you. Okay? Why is leadership the appropriate relationship more than management in this case? Because leadership is forced to take into account many people that are out of the radar when it comes to management. It's not just the people in the organization, it's people outside the organization. Which is why I like this image, because look, it has the old man there, that's me, and there's the future, that's you. And leaders will talk to the two extremes, not just to the dominant middle. Okay? Now, what do you need to be a good leader, to be a good change agent? I first developed this in 1982, I think, or 19, I'm not too sure now. This was in 1970, is that 1976? No, so this is the thing. I prepared this slide in 2015, but this, I think, if my wife would confirm, I started to use in the 80s. For me, for you to be an effective leader or an effective manager, you need mental skills, a whole variety of them. Not just logical thinking, not just systematic thinking, but creative thinking, fantasizing, dreaming. You need also knowledge management skills. You need to be able to acquire the right knowledge. And it isn't just listening. Google is a good way, but you shouldn't end with Google, especially not the first 3 pages. Those are the most popular because they're the most simple and they're the most incomplete. I've learned to go several pages down. Then finally, interaction skills. This is what distinguishes the effective manager. He or she or he not only talks well, she or he writes well. And she's not only good in sending messages, she's good in receiving messages. She hears things that are not said. She reads between the lines, and she can sense emotions that are being held back. On top of this, number 1 to me is a sense for and of context. You have to situate yourself in the context of the people that you're trying to change, because that is what will dictate what will work. You must have a very high level of curiosity. And this is one thing that I have always tried to engender with my children. Never stop being curious. Hindi baling, doesn't matter if people call you makulit or asking too many questions. That's how you learn. Across that is caring. Don't do it just for yourself. Do it because you think it will help you relate to people. That curiosity must always go with humility. To know what you do not know and to accept what you do not know. To know that you may be good but that you're not the best. To know that you know a lot but there's so much more you do not know. To know that you can do a lot but there's so much you cannot. And therefore have the humility to ask people to help you. And then caring must go with daring. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. I didn't get to where I was not making mistakes. Oh, I made horrendous mistakes. I'm still embarrassed to think about them, personally as well as professionally. But I learned. And I keep on thanking each class, because each class, each student taught me something. Each encounter with a faculty member taught me something. Each encounter with a client, with a beneficiary, with an audience, taught me something. And finally, for me, the ability to laugh at yourself. The ability to put yourself down is very critical. Don't take yourself too seriously. But don't take yourself too unseriously. Why do we do all of this? Why do we care to change? Because we want a better world. I hope that's what we want. Well, for me, this may be the end of my formal years as AIM professor, but my exploration, your exploration continues. The journey continues. And as I told Ken this morning, I am not leaving AIM. For so long as AIM needs me, it will always have me at its beck and call. I owe it a lot. I love this organization. It is worth giving my life to. Not at the expense of my family, of course, but it's there. So, thank you. Rather than the applause. The applause can give me a false sense of confidence. Questions, please. Can I shift to more? I will tell you one secret why I cannot say on my round too long. Was it 2 weeks ago?
Oh, good Lord.
I had a literal pain in the ass. I developed what they call an internal abscess. In Tagalog, pigsak sa loob ng puwet.
Oh, God.
It was horrible. I couldn't move. And I prayed to God, please, show me mercy. And He granted it. Last night I was praying for him. Please do not let me down just this one time. I want to be respected. But I was prepared to tell you, Ken, last night. Ken, we postponed. But now it's okay. It's no longer pain in the ass. It's there to remind me. And I've sworn never, even in a joke, wish boils and hemorrhoids on anyone. Even in jest. Yes, Maui.
In a desperate need to change the subject, Professor Mayo.
Yeah, because I know it embarrasses you.
Deeply. Having been in the military, when you try to lead change, there's a certain sort of discomfort personally I have as a leader where you have to keep part of the plan away from people.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd really like to be able to tell everybody this is what we're doing, so on and so forth. But there's a tension between the openness and, well, I would say maybe the field guys or frontline people saying, look, all you need to know is that you have to take this hill.
Yeah.
You don't need to know the massive battle plan with all the ships and so on and so forth. And how does that work? And how do you avoid blind spots as someone trying to lead change?
Firstly, the military is not a monolith. You will find out that the Navy has its way of doing things, the Air Force has its way of doing things, the Army has its way of doing things. And you will find out that there's a distinction between the regular forces and the special forces. Remember, I was in the special forces. And there, we always opened up to our people who were going to risk their lives. I remember when we were preparing for the Sambuanga siege, the original one, not the last one, but the original one in Kawakawa. There was a battle plan prepared by the staff of the Special Action Force. And it was prepared by 2 young lieutenants fresh out of the academy. Our commander then, Colonel Ray Velasco, a dear friend, who's incidentally born 1 year after me on the same day, called in the sergeant major of the SAF and another veteran and said, "What do you think? Our people," we had to tell them why it was going to be done that way. And their response was really funny. It was a put down, but put in a very funny way. They said, "Sir, if your plan is for us to die, this is a beautiful plan." That automatically told you volumes. It meant, please rethink. And so the colonel ordered the two lieutenants to sit down, and they did produce a beautiful plan. And even then, because the ground commander was from the Marines, was used to assaulting from the front and not having forces in the back, you know what happened. The culprits escaped while they firebombed a building and killed the hostages. So, in a war, people don't demand to know everything, as long as it is clear to them why that objective is there. Most soldiers know that in a battle, and special forces more than anybody. It's the goddamn guys in headquarters who never had battle experience, who can be very blithe about all these things. And that's why maybe, as they say, you really can't teach swimming until you've swam. Goes for case method professors. It's experience. It doesn't have to be very deep, but at least some sense of what reality is. I hope I answered your question. Other questions, please? Don't be ashamed. If you have raging disagreements. Yes,
Professor Mayo, your comments.
This is Mayo.
Your comments on work-life balance.
I made my mistakes. I was playing catch up, you know. When we graduated, we all had from MBM. Our average salary was 1,200, which was high for that time. When I joined the government, my salary was 1,250, which was not bad at that time. It was comparable to some of my classmates, maybe not as much as those with experience, who were now getting to 5. When I finally finished my 5 years in government, I had a fantastic salary of 2,500. My classmates in business were in the 15,000 range. So you can imagine the catch up I had to play. I wanted to give my family a better life. And so there I was accepting consultancies left and right. One time I don't know if my wife remembers it, but she got mad at me because I was saying, "Well, I'm doing all this for you. You have to help me explain it to the kids." And you know, she looked at me and she said, "Putang na." Whoever told you that that is what you wanted from me? And my kids, you know, one time they collected all of my travel papers, and they collected all of the airline socks, and eye patches. Later on, we traveled business class, all of those kits that you get in business class. And they laid it out in front of me, and they said, in effect, it was their way of telling me, in this last year, you spent 8 months away from us. And of the 4 months that you were with us, at least 1/3 of that was in the office, at least. The 2/3, well, you read a lot, you travel a lot, even in the Philippines. So in effect, gave us 1 month of your life. And that's when I decided, no, there has to be a balance. And I had to sit down with my family when my oldest son asked me, "Toto, why don't we have a Betamax? Still Betamax. Why don't we have a Betamax? Are we poor? Are we not rich?" I said, "No, we're not rich. We're just boastful." And then I explained to him why we don't have a Betamax. And I said, "This is your choice now. I can buy you a Betamax, but then I will have to haul ass a bit more." And he says, "Never mind. I think we can do away without the Betamax. And I think I've given that to my children largely. My oldest son, his decision to be a LaSalle brother was because of a decision that he really wanted to teach. And he told, the mother was telling him, but you could always apply to Brent, you could always apply to international school. After all, you have a LaSalle basic education and an Ateneo college degree. I said, sure, he lacks just the UP crowd. And he said, I don't want to teach brown-skinned children who dream of being Americans. And he says, I want to teach elementary school because by the time you teach high school or college, the horns have started to grow. And so he's there in Osamis, teaching elementary school. I asked him, how's the situation in Osamis? Normal. Puratong Balali tribes. Maute is not here. That's just about, I suppose, 80% of Mindanaoans want martial law for one reason or the other. So I'll accept that. So it's really up to you. But I think what was critical to Cora and I was early in our lives we defined what is enough. Oh, there was an incident. You know, I was handling a budget of 400 million pesos in 1971 to 72. That's big money at that time. And I was handling reparations from the Japanese. And we had a $1 million allocation, which was at that time maybe worth what? 8 pesos to the dollar. So it's 8 million, quite big. And the Japanese Sogo Sosha, the trading companies who were in charge of purveying the goods, they sent somebody to me. And all of them said the same thing. Professor Lopez, if you give us contract, we give you 1%. And my response was, I'm sorry, I don't operate that way. So sorry. We make it 3%. And back of my mind, I said, you see that door? You want me to throw you out of that door? And my wife later on, when I relate the incident to her, she says, good, because if you had accepted it, I would have left you. It's critical who you marry. You marry the wrong person, you could lead you the wrong way. I don't care what gender preference you have. Marry the right person. Be with the right person. Next question.
For alumni,
Alumni and guests, open. Please, don't
don't
be
be afraid
ashamed.
of the class participation. We won't grade you.
Oh, Alan, MBM.
85. I'm currently taking my doctorate for CET, which you already know. It's more like introducing a change management plan for an NGO.
You can use this.
Basically for the youth in Tondo. My question is, what sort of change do you think would be more adapted for them?
You'll have to ask your target.
Yes, I did. And there were certain things that came out. One was to remain as an NGO. Second, to become a hybrid NGO, which means an inclusion of business practices for even endeavors. The third one is a social enterprise. And when I approached that and I gave it to the executive director, who's a Dutch, very nice guy. He's been here in the last 20 years. And he said, I'd like to stick to the NGO model. And I wanted to introduce the social enterprise and the hybrid, but he was just stuck with it. And he just gave the answer. He was passionate about it, just being an NGO. But if I were to lead to certain changes, which approach that you have presented will be more convenient?
As far as hybrids are concerned, Maui, would you like to respond to that? You're the hybrid one. No, Maui is into social enterprises also.
Great.
I think it's very I think it's very important to realize that it's very difficult to manage up. If the Dutch person is the founder, I've founded several businesses, and I think it's important. My struggle as a founder, if I was in this person's place, is that I found it very difficult, took me in fact a decade, to realize that you can be very loyal to the vision of what you want to do. You just shouldn't be so hung up on the business model.
Yeah.
Right? But that's a very difficult thing to do because pivoting, which is what we call it in entrepreneurship, or change management, which is what managers call it, it feels like failure. It feels like failure. So there is an emotional component to that, I think, since Professor Mayo put me on the spot, that it may have nothing to do with the logic, which is, I think, echoing Prof. Mayo's lecture. But I think that the way to do that, to manage up, is to speak to the vision of the founder, which is to say, I've never actually met, I've been teaching here for 7 years, I've actually never met an MDM student who said, "Profit, I love profit." But
They're too embarrassed to say it.
I know, but I since I have no shame, I have no empathy for that. But what I find is convenient is saying profit is not necessarily evil, because you can help more people. Couch it in sustainability, in sustaining his or her legacy, because that's something that will speak to them. I think it's the packaging maybe, and not the business model. Because at first, they have to be open to the concept of changing the business model.
Well, they don't have a vision currently, except that they're just a provider for youth education. But when you look at the other segments by which they have operated in the last 9 years, which are very good, looking at their achievements, even their current failures, they've done well. They could be better. In other words, if certain aspects were to be changed. But that depends on how it's going to be packaged. How it can be modified, how it can be more behaviorally acceptable.
You know, your problem is similar to a lady I'm helping about women's lib or empowering women. She's doing it in another university. Her problem is, how do you empower women? And I was the only one in the panel. I was the only non-PhD in the panel. And my question was, have you answered the question of how you liberate men? Because really, the biggest stumbling block in the country, in a country like the Philippines, and in all male-dominated countries, is you cannot liberate women unless you give us a kick in the balls. Men can be hard-headed, and they mistake this head for that head. And that's why I have to kick him there. And the same thing, when you talk of the youth, my wife did a study on authoritarian patterns in the Philippines. When was this? 1968. And the fact is, Filipinos are taught to listen to authority and not question authority from the time they are children at home to the time they are at school. There are very few heretical schools like the University of the Philippines, and mostly really UP Diliman, where we were graded more for the questions we asked rather than the answers we gave. And even that has changed. At least in UP Elementary, British, that was how we were taught, to the point where the UP High teachers would automatically say, "Mr. Lopez, are you from UP Elementary?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." "Oh, it's obvious." Because of my impertinence. And then in UP, the professor said, "You're obviously from UP High." I said, "Yes, ma'am, probably so." Yeah. We had this way of conducting ourselves. We respected our teachers, but we did not take them lock, stock, and barrel, the same way that the Ateneans and the Lassallians would. You know, I've always allowed those two schools to settle one very important question. What's the second best university? So sorry for you Ateneans. Sorry for you Lasales. All my two sons there are LaSalle and Ateneo. So, yeah.
You mentioned PhDs. What starts for you? Dissertation.
Well, I sometimes think of this pahabaan ng dissertation.
I have another one. Preparing for a happy death.
Preparing for a happy death. Well, to some extent it helps. Until you realize that in 1999, I was shortlisted by ADB for a consultancy to Timur. I was the only non-PhD in the lot. The Timur government selected me. And when they were asked why, he says, he's got the experience we need. So a PhD is useful. It's very useful. It's critical, especially if you're in academia. Because that's what the standards are. And so I'm not saying don't take it. Take it, but take it for the right reasons. I think I took it for the wrong reasons, which is why I never finished it. I was curious. I wanted to see what it was. The problem with me is if I know I can do it, I don't want to see. I don't want to waste my time. I move on to the next adventure. That's the difference between me and my wife. She's so goal-oriented. Once she sets her mind to it, she'll do it. So I tell my sons, take her sense of purpose, adapt my curiosity. It's a good combination. You'll probably wind up with a very long bibliography. Question? Jimmy?
Well, not really a question, Mayo. Maybe a feedback. The first 2 decades of AIM, its image for non-AIM people like myself was that of an expensive ivory tower for people who could afford
Expensive ivory towers.
which was beyond the ken of most people in our country. To me, that image changed when, after people power, a lot of workshops took place within this institution. And many of those workshops involved non-AIM people like myself. That was really the first time we interacted with AIM professors. That was when we discovered the passion of individual mentors who, yes, were hobnobbing with the can-dos, but really had their hearts for the small people in our country and for the country and the nation at large. To me, that was the best invitation to come to AIM as a visitor, as a guest, as a change agent, making use of the facilities of the institution. That was where I became friends with yourself, with Gabini, with Ed, with Dusty, and his great friend Prof. How many of such people are here in AIM right now?
I can see 3 of them. Professor Noel Cortez, Professor Jamu Francisco, Professor Mayo.
Well, we hope to
They're young.
make this. We hope
Well,
to be able to
I wish Jikyo
enjoy
were
the
here
company.
because I'd like her to hear her say it. That was part of the soul we lost. This passion for service without forgetting that we needed to make money. That was replaced by a board that looked only at return on investment. But as far as they were concerned, they had to make 30% margin. We were willing to go lower than that in many cases, sometimes even giving our service for free, because it meant that people learned to trust us. Incidentally, many of those facilitations here, it wasn't just after 1986, even before 1986. We would have them here, but we helped every president, even up to Estrada, we helped him by having his legislative agenda worked out here. And the only credit we got was faculty academic points. We did not get any honoraria. But the joy of knowing that AIM had something to do with where this country was going. But again, part of the problem is the business side is we're not a robust economy. And until our economy gets very robust, it will be very difficult for us to say that AIM situated in the Philippines can generate the kind of new knowledge just looking at the Philippines. We have to put money in research outside. However, in development management, we are still considered leading edge. I just wish our board of trustees would put its money where its mouth is. They praise the CDM or the Swedish school, but we don't see the resources. We have many papers that have been published, but we don't do a good job of popularizing these papers. Jamu's outfit, the policy center, have countless papers, but we have not done a good job of popularizing them. And yet people ask me for electronic copies, and we are quoted. Maybe more than even UP or LaSalle or Ateneo. Simply because people know it comes from practice. But you know, some of the universities can be snooty. If you're not a PhD, they don't think you're up to it. And my response has always been, I'm not writing for PhDs. I'm writing for normal people. Well, it's 11:30. Thank you very much for this honor.
12:30.
It's been a privilege. It has been a pleasure. And I am leaving AIM, looking at this tree, looking at Ken. Oh, I should have mentioned Ken. Except that he's older. I see Kuhn, I see Frenzy, I wish Lyndon were here. I see Pat, I see, is that Chikyo? No, it's Pat. No, who's that? Oh, Weston, I think there's Mela there. For so long as these people are there, I think the AIM soul will find it. We will find the soul again. So I live happy even if I live sad. It's not easy to live 40 years of your life, 43 years of your life. It's been a pleasure. It's been a privilege. And it's been a deep, deep honor. So in my original language, madamo gid na salamat.
Damo na salamat. On behalf of the school, the institute, to Professor Mayo, Lopez, please. Mayo, we owe you.
No, you don't owe me. I owe you. Oh, I'm A-plus lecturer also.